Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Introduction to CompTIA Security Plus, presented by our fantastic technical instructor for today, Scott Rake. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the webinar. We do encourage participation throughout the webinar, so please use that chat or the Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Scott.
Why, thank you. So welcome. Hopefully you're not having to give up too much of your lunch break to be able to attend. And if you are, I will do my best to be brief. I try to I'll try to focus on quality, not as much about speed, but we'll try and find a nice balance, hopefully. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about Network Plus, the CompTIA Network Fundamentals certification. Oh, my apologies. I guess I have the wrong presentation loaded up. Give me 1 second, guys. I apologize. Why was...
Oh, no, no worries. Yeah, OneDrive files can be a little funky sometimes, so do not worry.
Not a big deal. I've got both of them. I just must have um, launched the wrong one by mistake. So
No worries at
not
all.
a problem. So there's the correct one. I don't know. There we go. And there we have it, the correct one. So there you go. Thanks for Mariella for that message, letting me know, because I'm not 100% convinced when I would have noticed that. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Security Plus, not Network Plus, which again, CompTIA, they have a whole variety of different sort of certifications focusing in different attributes, different areas of IT, and we'll have a little bit of insight, a little summary of some of the other certifications that might be attractive to you on top of this. So we'll talk a little bit about the purpose, why this is relevant, why this is important, give you some ideas of what to expect out of Security Plus, some of the key concepts that we would be covering, and then hopefully at least begin the prospect or process of giving you some insight into what type of effort and what you kind of can expect in terms of beginning that journey of gaining that certification. So one of the benefits of CompTIA is the global recognition that sort of comes with that certification. And it doesn't matter where we are, they are widely recognized in the IT industry globally, not just in cybersecurity, of course. In the context of what we're here to discuss, they are a globally recognized body of or organizational body for cybersecurity. Now, the purpose and sort of intention of the Security Plus is to be able to provide us with, first and foremost, the foundational knowledge and skills required to perform those core functions as a security specialist. The certification validates that we have those foundational skills, those fundamental skills established. And so you can have the knowledge, but the certification sort of codifies that and vouches for that knowledge. And it does so through this brand of CompTIA that everybody sort of already understands and appreciates. And security in particular can be an incredibly important certification to have because it is essential for anybody in the operating in the IT space. We oftentimes will say that while in terms of like organizational structures, you may have a department or a team that is purposefully tasked with cybersecurity in mind. You may have an information security management team with specific subject matter experts operating and kind of living full time in that space. But security is really everybody's job. It doesn't matter if you bring somebody from New Horizons in as a contractor to conduct a class live and in person, which we do regularly. Uh, and so if that's beneficial to you, then yeah, we can come and teach on site. But even I, walking into your business, I have a responsibility to support and uphold your security requirements while I'm on site. So it's not just the responsibility of people who are purposefully assigned to that team or that department, it's everybody's job. And that's what this certificate can help you validate. It's essentially a recognized um, body of experts or brand that is vouching for your knowledge. And so at that point, with that certification, it's not just trust me because I say so, because I can tell you I know this stuff. It's I can talk the talk, but I've got a body of proof. I've got a paper trail that validates that my knowledge is at a certain standard. And that can be very important. So it validates all the essential skills and knowledge for cybersecurity. Gives you an ability to demonstrate competency in a way that kind of offers a little bit more veracity than it would if I were just expecting you to take me at my word. And that can also enhance career opportunities. It it's a validated and demonstrable skill set that you can represent and present to an employer as proof that you have the foundations that can be built off of. And so without it, it makes anything more advanced much, much more challenging. I won't say impossible, but definitely more of an uphill battle. So this gets us the foundational skills. It allows us to validate that and gives us a perspective that we can build on. And it can also help us maintain a proper security posture, protecting the information that we need to protect. And that's an important thing. And I would say another benefit of being literate in cybersecurity and having that Security Plus certification is fundamentally it helps me understand what my security posture actually is, and I can evaluate that against what we're trying to achieve, and that can help me kind of gauge what kind of work needs to be done for us to be able to realize those goals. It also helps us stay current, and this is probably one of the biggest challenges in the security space overall, because security is a highly fluid environment. There are changes almost, it feels like sometimes minute to minute, with new threats that emerge, and we have to be able to respond to those new threats in a way that ensures that we are able to maintain that security posture that we've worked so hard to achieve. And so staying current is an important component of not just CompTIA Security Plus, but security in a more generalized concept. And it can also increase credibility and trust with clients and employers. Again, because it's not just trust me because I say so, because it's me. It's you can trust me because I have this proof that has been validated by a globally recognized authority in this space. So some of the key concepts that we're going to be talking about, and there's quite a few. We're going to go over a myriad of different threats, attacks, and vulnerabilities, and we'll start by discussing what those terms actually mean, and then contextualizing those in a much more real-world perspective, so that we understand the difference between a vulnerability versus a threat. Right? Vulnerability is just a weakness, right? Like my computer is vulnerable to liquid spills because it's not waterproof. And so a threat to that would be the fact that I have a nice giant cup of water sitting on my computer, uh, or sitting on my desk rather. And so that water represents a threat to that particular vulnerability that I'm exposed to. So just understanding, number one, what the terminology is actually referring to gives me a lot of insight in how I might want to perceive my ecosystem and my environment so that I can minimize as much weakness as I can and monitor the types of threats that legitimately need to be paid attention to. Attacks are always malicious, right? This is somebody explicitly trying to exploit a vulnerability by leveraging an attack in a malicious way. But one of the things that I personally, and I think a lot of us who operate in this space, like to make sure we cover and we talk about is malicious attacks are only part of what cybersecurity is trying to help us prepare for. Because is there a risk of somebody breaking into my home and pouring water down the gullet of my computer? Technically, yeah. That's probably there I am exposed to that particular risk at some level. But I'm also exposed to the risk of me knocking that water over and accidentally spilling it. Um, as far as the idea of threats and vulnerabilities are concerned, not a lot changes just because my intention wasn't malicious. So understanding this terminology and how it kind of plays into what we actually do to improve our security posture becomes an important part of the discussion. And so, yeah, we do spend a little bit of time making sure that we really develop this understanding of vulnerabilities, threats, and attacks, and we pull our perspective back enough so that we can account for the malicious attacks, but also the mistakes and the accidents that can happen because the outcomes can be similar. We also cover a variety of different technologies and tools that we can lean into to help improve our security posture and kind of reduce the target that might be on our back. We take an architectural approach and design approach. So if you're in software development, or if you're just trying to architect a new network or a new infrastructure, whether that's a traditional sort of on-premises type of environment, or if you are needing to make sure that your migration into a cloud space is designed the right way and secured. We'll talk about a little of all of that. We'll talk about identity and access management, right? Most of you, or at least some of you, are likely familiar with something called the rule of least privilege, the rule of least access, or the principle of least access. And if you're not, that's okay, because that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about and decomposing in this class, not necessarily at length, but in detail. This idea that I want to provide all of my stakeholders, all of the relevant stakeholders with the right amount of access to network resources and corporate resources that will enable them to do their job. And I want to try and avoid providing them with access that they just don't need. And that's all kind of wrapped up in this process of identity and access management. We'll talk about risk management and some of the variety of different ways that we can participate in identifying and mitigating risk. As well as cryptography, keeping our data and our communications confidential. And that's all cryptography really is. It's relying on some sort of an algorithm or cipher suite to take plain text data, something that's easily readable, just like you're able to read the content on my screen right now, and converting that into an unreadable format. So if somebody does violate our identity and access management tools or the rules we've established that violates that rule of least access, and we divulge information to somebody who doesn't have the right to view it, if it's encrypted, chances are really good that they're not going to be able to utilize any of that data. And so we'll talk about plenty of cryptography and something called public key infrastructure. That's usually a pretty fun, and I'm a nerd, so I think it's a fun topic of discussion. But cryptography and PKI is just one of those elements that are kind of fun to talk about and understand a little bit better because it's something that we work with and we interact with every single day. So having a little bit of insight in terms of how that is accomplished, that's kind of fun to me. So we already talked about most of this at CompTIA. One of the big benefits of it is the global sort of recognition that is almost automatically associated with the certification. That can assist us in career advancements. Um, and it does also focus on practical implementation. So it's not all theory. And that's something that I really am happy about with CompTIA in general. Because CompTIA has done a lot of work in the last 10, 15 years of sort of reinvigorating the CompTIA certifications, making sure that they aren't just focused on theory, academic knowledge, that there's more of a balance between making sure we understand the theory of how everything works, but how we actually live with this on more of a day-to-day basis. And so I'm very happy to see CompTIA take kind of a shift in that direction. Because at the end of the day, from a demand perspective, we need people who understand the theory, but also understand how to apply it in a real world circumstance. And so that's something that you can sort of expect out of the CompTIA not necessarily, well, the certification doesn't necessarily provide you with the hands-on, but the training, the classroom perspective focuses an equal amount of time on the theoretical implement aspects of it, the academics, but also hands-on real-world implementation of these concepts, so that you walk away not only prepared for that certification, but also a practical understanding of what it's going to take to apply these concepts um, in a real world scenario. And this becomes important not just to be able to create a safe and secure environment for us to conduct business, but compliance, with governance requirements or legal requirements. For somebody that works in almost any industry, right? Like at New Horizons, right? We're subjected to governance requirements and legal requirements that we have to make sure that we not only are we compliant with, but we can demonstrate compliance in order for us to keep our certification, to keep our accreditation, and to earn the right to continue to conduct business. But if you're in like the healthcare field, you have all the same type of requirements that I might have here at New Horizons, and then a ton more, right? So being able to function in a way that enables us to do business, but also allows us to do business in a way that allows us to maintain compliance. I just like to refer to it as like coloring inside the lines. That's huge, because if we're non-compliant, we're talking fines. We may lose. We may even, in kind of the more extreme circumstances, may not even be allowed to conduct business until we become compliant. Sort of like a restaurant. If a restaurant is not compliant with enough, health and safety guidelines, then they're shut down until they're able to become compliant, and then the government, the state or the city may allow them to reopen. So understanding how information security management in general enables us to maintain compliance, which in turn enables us to keep our doors open, becomes a critical part of just day-to-day business and day-to-day operations. So this is hugely beneficial. It's insanely relevant given the things that are going on in the world around us. And so this is one of those certifications that I feel like almost everybody would benefit from. And so if you take one of our classes, I say we, but you will receive a lot of support. Right? Not only are you going to have a copy of the book, but you'll have in that book all of the exam requirements that will break down what areas are going to be covered on the exam and how much of the exam is going to be encapsulated by those areas. You're going to have, so not just the actual book, but a lot of resources, a lot of additional materials that can make the journey of prepping and getting ready to sit that exam a much more attainable goal. Uh, you're going to have a lot of have a lot of practice questions. So within the CompTIA tools, you'll have a series of full-blown practice exams that you can use to sort of validate what you know and help you identify weak areas that you need to go back and study. But you'll also, on top of those, have a series of quizzes that are a lot more focused, a lot more targeted against specific areas out of the material. So by the time you sit down and take an exam, you should have and will likely have already been exposed to the myriad of different types and styles of questions that you're going to have to tackle on the live exam. And you will have seen examples of the easiest types of questions that you're going to encounter, as well as the most difficult. So that, to me, speaks to another really important aspect of getting a certification, passing that exam, that oftentimes doesn't get a lot of oxygen in the conversation, and that's test anxiety. I get a lot of it. I get a lot of test anxiety and always have. And one of the things that I have found that helps me manage that anxiety better is removing ambiguity. All right? One of my favorite definitions of the word risk is uncertainty of outcome. I love that definition of risk. The more uncertainty there is when it comes to the outcome or the result we're going to achieve, the more risk is involved with, with doing that work. And so going through the practice test and all the quizzes, going through the simulations and all the labs that give me that hands-on, the practical application of these concepts goes a long way to helping me uncover where in my body of knowledge I have that ambiguity that I need to address. So that I will know very specifically before I ever have to sit down to take the exam where my strong areas and my weak areas are, so I have the opportunity to beef those up and to improve them. Now, the exam itself, I don't want to say that it's gotten harder. It's not so much that it's gotten harder, but it's gotten much more practical, right? So the exam format is a large part of it is going to be multiple choice questions. But there's also some matching questions and what they call performance-based questions, or PBQs. Those performance-based questions are usually based a lot more in the pragmatic or the practical implementation of some of these concepts. So there's going to be a little bit of a simulation involved, and they will ask you to achieve some sort of an outcome within the context of Security Plus and give you an environment to be able to demonstrate that you can facilitate that outcome. And so I do like that quite a bit, because implementing those performance-based questions and passing that exam gives you the ability to demonstrate that you know more than just the definitions of terms and the academic knowledge. That you can demonstrate how to leverage them for a specific type of goal. And that can make the exam a little bit more challenging, but again, you will have access to all the labs and all the simulations, so that you shouldn't see any real surprises when it comes to the actual test questions that you encounter, because they're all going to be sort of built around the same level and based on the same concepts, whether it's a lab or an activity that we execute in a simulation, or it's a question that we have to answer from an exam perspective. And that just kind of reveals my biggest tip for success is to leverage the resources, right? There are, say, 10 chapters. There's more than 10 chapters in the book, but let's just say 10 chapters. Each chapter is going to have at least 10 to 20 questions associated to that chapter that allow you to verify just sort of how much of that material you retained, how much of it you understand. And those are just the quizzes. Each chapter will also have a series of hands-on activities that you can perform, whether it's a simulation or something else, or just access to a virtual machine that allows you to kind of execute some of the steps. You'll have the ability to apply those hands-on. And so as you go through each of those chapters, doing all of those, the associated quizzes and all those activities, get you a long way for being ready to sit down and take the exam. There's another pretty standard tip that I like to give anytime it becomes relevant. So this is something that I would give regardless of what type of certification anybody was trying to get. And I'll even go ahead and put it in the chat. Right now, I'm teaching an ITIL class, and I gave my ITIL class the same advice yesterday on our first day. And that is simply the vendor is always right. Even when they're wrong, the vendor's always right. So if I'm sitting down to take an exam, I need to be cognizant and aware of who wrote the exam question, right? Whose answer are they looking for? So when I sit down to take a CompTIA exam, let's say the Security Plus, and they're asking me the best approach to address a specific vulnerability, or what is the first thing I should do, they're not asking me really, what would Scott Rake do? They're going to ask you according to our recommendations articulated in our Security Plus material, what is the recommended first step? And so just having a reminder that CompTIA is always right can be a really useful tip to keep in mind that will help you achieve success, because it's really easy while you're taking an exam to sort of slip into that mindset where you start answering it from the perspective of this is how I would do it as an individual, or this might be how my company handles it from a process perspective. And while that might be useful and beneficial and fantastic, it's not necessarily going to be in alignment to the CompTIA recommendation that will help you choose the correct answer from the exam perspective. So that's a really important tip for success that, as far as I'm concerned. And it's true. When I sit down to take an ITIL exam, I have to remind myself that ITIL is always right. Now, if it's a Microsoft exam, it's Microsoft is always right. That I always want to answer the question from the perspective of the vendor's recommendations. But there we go. So what's covered? We talk about governance. Governance is just that means by which organizations are directed and controlled. It's where all of our policies, our procedures, our processes, our overall corporate strategies all come from governance. So security decisions need to be assessed and addressed there. Incident response and resolution. When security incidents occur, how are we going to manage those? And how are we going to be able to unring the bell? We approach security from the different sort of technical domains that we might have to assess security. So for Wi-Fi or other wireless technologies, how are we going to apply and uphold security principles when we operate in a cloud ecosystem? How are we going to ensure that the software that we're investing in or the software that we're designing from and building from the ground up, how are we going to make sure that that software is designed with as few security vulnerabilities as possible? Mobile security and Internet of Things, IoT, especially relevant in today's day and age. The way the world has evolved and the way the world is continuing to evolve means that mobility is going to be a huge part of our personal and professional lives, and we need to be able to sort of eat our cake and have it too. I need to be able to be functional. I need to be able to be productive regardless of where I might be in the world. And I need to be able to be productive and functional without sacrificing security. So we definitely talk about that. Virtualization and containerization security. And this is largely for things like application development. But anytime we are virtualizing or creating containerized applications, we need to address those individual elements for security as well. And social engineering. This is huge. We'll talk a lot about that in the class as well, but this is the easiest type of attack to perpetrate, and it's one of the regularly most successful. So it's definitely something to kind of sink your teeth into and really try to understand. And then we'll touch on forensics and something called secure DevOps. Forensics and secure DevOps is not a focus on Security Plus, so we really just sort of introduce the concepts. So don't worry if you're trying to decide if this is the right class for you. We're not getting into forensics or secure DevOps at a level where you're expected to develop anything that approaches subject matter expertise. These are entire courses all by themselves and entire certification pathways all by their lonesome. So we're really just introducing the concepts and discussing the relevancy of it. But like I said, there are plenty of other areas of study within CompTIA. There are more advanced cybersecurity certifications that get more and more specialized. You can also segue into, degrees. You can apply it to you can use your work experience and use it to inform future experience. And one of the things that I do like, back in 2011 or 2012, CompTIA made a pretty significant change, one that was necessary. Up until that time, if you took a CompTIA certification and passed it, it was yours for life, and so it was a permanently awarded cert. Um, and around 2011 or 12, they changed it to needing to be renewed every 3 years. Not a Don't worry, you don't have to sit down and take exams every 3 years just to prove that you're still knowledgeable. You can submit continuing education credits. So if you're able to jump through the CompTIA guidelines and demonstrate that you have maintained a current skill set, then it just sort of resets the clock on your certification, which I think is fantastic because if it makes us it puts us more in the driver's seat, makes us more active. But if we're able to maintain a current skill set, we don't have to worry about resetting the exam at all. So we can effectively end up with a lifetime certification, but in a way that is not irrelevant because of the old technology and the sort of legacy material. But like I said, there are plenty of exams, plenty of options with variety of different levels of specificity. Like A plus is still very broad in its approach, but you get into things like CompTIA pen testing. This is a more specific security certification built on what we sometimes refer to as ethical hacking or penetration testing. This is our trust but verify, right? Where we actively try to exploit our network or our ecosystem to try and identify vulnerabilities that maybe weren't protected with our implementation of security. So we can prove that our security is as good as we think it is, or we can find vulnerabilities that we didn't know existed, which is just another opportunity for improvement. So there's tons of options in here. But outside of that, that's kind of all she wrote from a presentation perspective. I tried to be as quick and efficient as possible, but um, it's still been a little bit of time. So does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns, anything at all?
I'll give our audience a second to throw any last minute comments or any questions, but just wanted to remind everyone that if they needed any more info on this topic, they can visit us at newhorizons.com. And if you missed out on any part of this session, we will definitely be sharing a recording with all of you in an email after the webinar. We just got a nice little comment here. Excellent info and intro. Thanks
Appreciate
for the
that.
presentation. So I think we did a fantastic job today, Scott. We as
Well,
fun.
I don't know about fantastic, but if it's passable, I'm good with that. I appreciate it,
Absolutely.
guys.
Absolutely awesome. Well, thank you so much, Scott, and thank you so much to our fantastic audience for joining us today. And if you guys need any more info, please reach out. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks for taking time out of your day, guys.
Absolutely. Alrighty. We'll see you all very soon in the classroom. Bye now.